So you guys might be wondering why we're wearing life jackets. Life jackets signify security, safety, and peace of mind. By definition, a life jacket is something that would save your life.
Really, though, a life jacket is a false sense of security. Because when you find yourself 900 miles off the coast of Madagascar with a cyclone barreling down on you, this thing is not going to save your life.
So one thing that we learned is that, it's not about the life jacket, it's about just staying in the boat that was important for us. We're here to tell you a little bit about, give you a taste of what our journey was like, and talk about some of the challenges that we navigated through it.
These things are also a little hard to swim in, so we're going to take these things off and show you guys a little video clip of our journey.
So you guys are probably wondering why we didn't bring the Siberian Husky. Unfortunately, they didn't let her on the boat.
So 3.5 years was a long time. So let's reel back the clock a little bit to 2009. I'll tell you where I was. I was in Southern California. If any of you have been in Southern California, you know it's a pretty beautiful place. So I was there. I had a pretty nice job. I had a lot of friends. I was living about a block away from the beach. I had a beautiful girlfriend.
A couple of them.
But there was something that just wasn't unsatisfying about my life. Or there was something that was unsatisfying about my life. And so I looked at the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar company that I was working at and asked myself if I would ever want that position. The answer came pretty quickly that I would never want to be him. And so I had to think what I wanted to do next with my life. I took a stroll down Newport Beach, contemplating this idea of what I could possibly do. And if you really think about it, there's some pretty amazing things you can do out there. And I had an idea that seemed pretty great.
Chad's usually the one that has these crazy ideas. He comes to me with one at least once a week. This one just happened to be sailing around the world. And it was something that intrigued me. I thought it was, something we could pursue.
So Bret was on board. I was pretty stoked. So I started looking at boats. And it didn't take me long. About 2 months later, I found a 1976 Hudson Seawolf, and she was beautiful. So if you guys purchase anything like that, you want to take her out for a spin. Bret was still up in Portland, so I called my buddy down in San Diego, and he came up for the weekend. We were walking down the dock over to the boat, and I stopped by the sailor, another sailor who was right next to me at the marina, and I asked him about the weather, because you typically talk about the weather when you're sailing. This guy told me it was going to be a little rough out there. He said there was going to be about 8-foot swells and that we shouldn't go out. I nodded, smiled at him, and didn't do much listening of him, but walked on the dock, and I said to myself, this is an old man. They're only 8-foot swells, and I'm sailing around the world. What's an 8-foot swell? So we took off. It's about 28 miles out to Catalina, and got about an hour out, and we saw the 8-foot swells this old man was talking about, and they were significant. At that point, I realized something, which kind of hit home. I realized that I'm susceptible to seasickness.
So that was when I got my second phone call. It wasn't as enthusiastic as the first one. But the one thing that I didn't tell Chad is I had just given my 2 weeks notice since we had bought in the boat. So we were all in. I mean, there was really nothing we could do at that point. We had to keep going. I had told all my friends and quit my job, and I went down to San Pedro and lived on the boat and started working on it and preparing. I met a bunch of people in the marina that had been preparing their own boats for 8 to 10 years. And I came to the realization that, a lifetime of people preparing doesn't get you to the next step. It wasn't going to get us to sail around the world.
We didn't want to be those people that were sitting on the dock for 8 to 10 years thinking about going on a journey. So we took about 3 months to prepare, and we took off.
Yeah, we cast our dock lines, and we really didn't have much experience when we left or knowledge of anything. So, I mean, I didn't know how to sail. Honestly, it was the second sailboat I was ever on.
Needless to say, we ran into problems very quickly after we left.
But, I mean, the boat taught us a lot, and we just kind of rolled with the punches and kept going. So, I mean, actually in San Diego here, we grounded coming in, which was our first leg. And then our next leg, we went down to Mexico. And another one of those things, the sailors were telling us there was going to be rough weather.
We were a little more intelligent at our trip down to Cabo than I was going out to Catalina. And so we went with a couple other people. We joined the Baja Haha Rally, which is pretty cool. They leave from San Diego and they go down to Mexico. So we figured safety in numbers. It took about a day before we got a forecast that was going to be a storm. And the safety in numbers didn't really apply anymore because 60% of these boats that we went down with went over to a dock or an anchorage. And we thought, hey, we're sailing around the world. We're going to keep going.
So the wind picks up, and the first thing I do is run down in the cabin and open a book on heavy weather sailing. So I'm down in the cabin, flipping through the pages, yelling at Chad, telling him to drop sail and how to, steer with the big swells. We really just had no idea what we were doing. But the fact of the matter is, we had laid out this groundwork of what was important to us. And what was important for that trip was we just wanted to stay afloat, stay alive. We wanted to have the mast up and the keel down, which for most sailors, those are bare minimum things. But, I mean, we did run into a lot of problems as a result of not learning how to sail. We ended up learning a lot along the way. This image is an example of us coming into Fiji. We had our jib rip off, and it just missed Chad's head, fell in the water. We had to lash it up. It was as we were coming through a motu, and we almost lost the boat because we were coming through this really narrow pass, and we lost the sail at the same time, sailing upwind.
We relied quite a bit on athleticism because we didn't have very much knowledge. And this is an example of our engine. Before I left, the things that I knew about engines was I had a car. And so when I put my key into the car and I turn it, the car typically starts. Boats were a little different. So you put the key in your boat and you press a button and then it starts. Usually I would ask a mechanic to help me out after that. But in the middle of the ocean, there are no mechanics.
So that's true. I was actually the resident mechanic. But as resident mechanic, our boat ended up breaking in Panama. It seized. I don't know if you know about engines, but seizing isn't good. And so we sailed from Panama across the Gulf of Panama down to Ecuador, just under sail. And we anchored there, and we were positioned there, looking across the Pacific and wanting to go that direction. Without any mechanical ability or the resources or money to fix our engine, we sat and thought whether we actually needed it and whether we needed that to cross the Pacific. And we came to the conclusion that we didn't. We were sailing around the world. So we left. We just cast off and we just left.
Winston Churchill really nailed it with us. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another without the loss of enthusiasm.
But it wasn't just sailing and engines that were difficulties. We didn't know anything about boat maintenance. So we didn't know how to fiberglass. We didn't know how to do any carpentry work. We didn't know the difference between AC and DC for electric. We also didn't know how to plumb. But at the end of the trip, we learned all these things. And it was a great journey, just learning how to solve these problems.
And you do solve the problems. When you're faced with a challenge, you'll find an answer. And so we didn't know the difference between AC and DC. We ended up designing our own electrical system. We installed solar panels so that we would have energy for our entire trip. We learned chemistry because you have to mix epoxies to fix wood. And we learned carpentry because we needed to catch fish. We wanted to carve out little lures.
So our last challenge that we really had was food. And this is an image of me in Mauritius gnawing on a piece of sugar cane that I found. And we were really just kind of scavengers. We learned how to spearfish. We learned how to climb coconut trees. We learned how to catch coconut crabs. We tried to shoot wild boar unsuccessfully. But honestly, I mean, we dove for oysters. We learned how to live a self-sustaining existence by catching fish, and fish goes bad after a couple hours, so we learned how to cut it into small pieces and make jerky out of it, hanging it on the line. They also made really good dog treats for the puppy.
So we had plenty of situations where we needed to reevaluate our journey. When we started, we thought we were going to go east around the world, and we ended up going west, which is kind of difficult.
So the one thing that kept us grounded with this throughout the overall thing was we developed a mantra, which was really help us to remind us what's important and what we should continue to do. So I'd like to share our mantra with you guys, just very briefly.
Today is a new day in our quest around the world.
Let's celebrate being alive and staying afloat.
Let's move forward and think clearly.
Use energy to fight challenges, not each other.
Let's have fun and learn something new.
Toss a line in the water and catch lunch.
Sail hard with the wind and relax in the doldrums.
Everyone stays in the boat.
A clean boat is a safe boat.
Let's keep the mast up, keel down, and make the most with the resources we have. Welcome to the Broken Compass.
That really kept us grounded.
And it also helped us stay focused on the end goal in mind, which we really just wanted to cross all the oceans and survive through this 3.5-year journey.
A lot of businesses, what they'll do is they'll create a mission statement, and they'll write it down, and they'll file it away, and they'll think, oh yeah, this is really nice in a presentation. We woke up every day looking at this mantra, and we would hold each other accountable. When we would fight, I would tell Bret we couldn't fight because it was part of this mantra that we had. And so it's good to have something that keeps you focused like that. And it allowed us to sail around the world, because if we didn't have that vision, we never would have made it.
So we were talking about making our big step in life was we decided to quit our jobs and sail around the world. We looked at some statistics, and according to Forbes, 74% of people would consider leaving their jobs. I fell into that category. I was really happy up in Portland. I had a great job, and Chad came to me with this proposal, and yeah, I mean, I'd consider leaving my job if someone offered to sail around the world.
32% are actively looking, and I would have been considered part of that 32%. After I realized I wasn't where I wanted to be, and I needed to do something else, I would have been part of the 32% looking.
And only 1.7% of people actually make the move, and that's just taking a big step. It doesn't have to be moving your job or sailing around the world. It can be really small things, like hitting on a girl at a bar, or quitting alcohol and smoking, or even making a move from one location to another.
If you do hit on an attractive girl at a bar, you may not succeed. And we faced a lot of difficulties in our voyage. We didn't succeed all the time. We hit a lot of failures, but it was worth it. And at the end of the day, we were part of the 1.7% that made the move. And we encourage all of you to be the 1.7% too.
Because sailing around the world is kind of cool.
Thank you.